In September, Russia and Turkey signed an agreement calling for a ceasefire in Idlib province in northern Syria. Both countries were supposed to guarantee that attacks inside Idlib would be avoided. There are an estimated 3 million people living there, but they are living without even the most basic services. But as correspondent Nick Schifrin reports, the people on the ground are still facing attacks.
Just like any one-year-old, Omar al-Dagim loves his father's motorbike, even if he needs his older brother's help. Yay! These days, he needs more help than ever. He needs his father Mohammed's help to carry him. Last month, Omar lost his left leg when his family home was hit by a government airstrike. A Syrian jet targeted their village. It killed Omar's mother, who was 7 months pregnant with a boy. Also killed that day another woman and 7 students at a primary school. And just as White Helmet volunteers were rescuing the wounded, another airstrike. Today, al-Dagim is grateful his son is alive, but al-Dagim misses his wife and is worried about Omar's future.
I look at Omar and I see he is missing everything in life. The love of a mother, for him to go out and play with his brothers. His brothers will be playing and he tries to get up so he can play with them.
Omar is being cared for at Ma'aret al-Numan Central Hospital in Idlib province. He's just like so many victims in this war. The last month, he was supposed to be safe. Omar and his family were living in Jarjanaz in Idlib province. In September, Turkey and Russia agreed to create a demilitarized buffer zone, remove heavy weaponry and rebel fighters, and halt military operations. But the agreement has loopholes, says the Middle East Institute's Charles Lister.
That jihadist groups linked to al-Qaeda are not part of that agreement, which in the regime's eyes explains why they have continued some level of military action. So in a way, it's really just a regime ploy to keep pressure on the area.
Keep pressure on the province that is the rebels' final stronghold. No one rebel group is in control, but the most dominant is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, known as HTS, a sub-branch of al-Qaeda. The militant's presence provides the Syrian government an excuse to continue targeting. And that targeting looks like this: hallowed buildings, body bags, and thousands fleeing an onslaught the buffer zone was supposed to prevent. Idlib is home to 3 million people, many of whom are internally displaced. Hundreds of thousands live without basic services, in overcrowded camps, or in the remnants of bombed-out buildings. Miriam al-Dagim works at a women's center. She fled the bombing in Jarjanaz and says she's a long way from going back home.
As long as the regime forces remain at the front lines and the shelling continues, it's impossible to return, because the situation is not secure at all. Anytime we think of coming back, the shelling and bombardment starts again.
The only reason the bombing isn't worse is that Syrian ally Russia is reluctant to launch a full-on offensive, and the Syrian regime can't move forward without Russia's support.
Retaking Idlib would be a huge military challenge, and most of the onus of responsibility for a successful campaign would fall on Russia. So Russia's patience, I think, here is key. And at least for now, Russia's patience is translating into regime patience.
Turkey is also resisting a full-scale Idlib onslaught. Turkish troops monitor the buffer zone, and Turkey is hoping to prevent more Syrian refugees from joining the already 3 million refugees inside Turkey.
A major escalation in Idlib is literally Turkey's worst-case scenario. And so Turkey is expending a huge amount of energy, a lot under the surface and behind the scenes, to convince the whole spread of armed groups to sustain this deal.
And so that means most of the countries operating in Syria want to see political progress. This month, the foreign ministers of Iran, Russia, and Turkey met in Geneva with retiring UN envoy Staffan de Mistura. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said the countries were determined to set up a new committee to rewrite Syria's constitution. The U.S. has tried to pressure Russia and the Syrian regime by withholding reconstruction aid and blocking refugee repatriation, as top U.S. envoy James Jeffrey said earlier this month.
None of those things are happening, and they're not going to happen until the political process makes progress, as far as I can see. And I don't see a change in that, and I think that's dawning on at least the Russians.
But there is still no political progress, and until there is, the residents of Idlib will likely continue to be targeted, despite the de-escalation zone.
For us, nothing has really changed. For us, there is no difference in the end. Life has not become better, quite the opposite. Now, tension has increased. We feel that there is literally no one left in Jarjanas. The town is completely demolished.
Residents with nowhere else to flee have little optimism. We asked Miriam Al-Dagim whether she had any hope for the future.
No, as long as the situation continues like this, it's impossible to have hope.
Just before the airstrike, Omar's family took this video. He had just learned to walk. Today, Omar's best hope is to make it to Turkey to receive a prosthetic leg. His missing limb is another sign the heaviest price paid in this war is paid by civilians. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schifrin.